How y'all doing? You know, it's fascinating the books you find and how you find them when you go down a rabbit hole and searching for it. For this case, I was looking at Stephen Fabian's website here. He's a classic illustrator of science fiction and fantasy. He's currently in his 90s. He's got a long career. Just look up Stephen Fabian art, and you can find his website. And I've covered him in previous videos featuring it and how to navigate through his site. And as I was doing that one day, I noticed one of the pictures here, which fascinated me because it involves a woman and a werewolf in the background, and that is to House of the Wolf. This is done by Basil Copper, and I reviewed this book back last October at the time I'm recording of this. So it's a typical werewolf search in the castle of Hungary. For those who like playing the card game, the Ultimate Werewolf, things like that. This falls on the same themes. So Stephen Fabian did the cover, and he also did the interior chapter art. And then later this brought me to look into Valancourt Books, which is current publishers of this book. You go to that website and look up Basil Copper, and I found this one, The Great White Space. Also done by Basil Copper. No Stephen Fabian artwork into it, but still by Valancourt Books, and I'll talk about them later. You probably want to explore that site. It's got a treasure trove of classic horror and stuff like that. But again, this one right here I picked up and read it. It's not that big of a read, and it was published in 1974. And I have to admit, when I read it, knowing that, I kind of put in a theory of mind something like a 1970s movie. But with that said, let's take a look and see what it's about. We're introduced to our main point of view character here. That's Frederick Plowright. He's an English photographer, and he's hired for the Great Northern Expedition. The leader of this expedition is Clark Ashton Scarsdale. Many of you already see where that name came from. And he's hiring a small crew with special equipment to go on this expedition where Scarsdale has been there before, but he didn't get that far, and he wasn't properly equipped, and now he's doing it for this next one. He's trying to keep it hush-hush for press reasons and all that. So he hires Plowright as a photographer, Scarsdale's the leader. He also brings on board Cornelius Van Dam, who's geologist and metallurgist, Jeffrey Prescott, who is a linguist, particularly in Egyptology, and Norman Holden, who's a historian and radio expert. To help them on this journey there, Scarsdale puts in 4 special tractors that will, give them not only the means of transporting them there, also to supply all their goods, which includes guns, food, notes, boats, etc. There's no Necronomicon in this, but there is the book that Scarsdale continuously looks forward to, in secret as possible, is The Ethics of Igor. And so the expedition allows them to travel east at first, near the border of Tibet. Then they travel north to the Black Mountains up there. And when they reach their destination, it is to a big entrance, 500 feet high, a huge cave. And then they go in, and that's where things start getting interesting. And if you're familiar with Lovecraftian horror, you should understand what you're getting into. At first, a massive cave here, which 500 feet tall, which is interesting enough, but it's obviously not a natural cave, especially when there's some structures out there with ancient hieroglyphs that they're just barely able to translate here through the Book of Igor and through the linguists there who read Egyptology, or understand how hieroglyphics work. So as they go in, they find very long tunnels made out of an unusual rock that they can't cut through at all, and so it kind of gives you wonder what the inhabitants, how they built this and what it was for. After this long tunnel, they go into this great opening space there with they can't see the top, no lights can reach there, but they got apparently above source light that's given it an interesting, a limited amount of light down upon them, but also gives a good imagination of the atmosphere about this. And they go further into this wide open space to the underground lake, which they've really got boats to cross that. And upon reaching there, there's a long series of stairs on up. They're always moving north through their instruments, what have you. So they're making base camps as they go along. Traveling up the steps, they find at the top these numerous rows of jars, which they looked into, and I won't explain. I'm not going to explain what I'm not going to spoil that part here. So upon recording that and taking notes, what they can, they go further. They go into this ancient city, and they find a little bit of the records upon there, but not gaining too much. It's completely empty. But always further north, upon that, beyond that city, is a glow that slowly gets bigger and bigger until they find out that is the Great White Space they're talking to. What is it? What will they bring about? Will it answer any of their questions? Can they make it? Will they understand who the inhabitants were of the city and what have you? And again, it's Lovecraftian horror. If you're familiar with that at all, you should not be surprised at what to expect out of this. So let's talk about Valancourt books here. So in their website at valancourtbooks.com, you get to see some of their selection up front. And while, yes, we do see a lot of the modern covers, they're not overly too bad, but they're now nowhere near what the old paperbacks used to be. But this website doesn't all have that. We'll explore that shortly. So you see some of the collections of various types. Well, let's take a look of what they are about. Let's take a look at history. And of course, here we have Valancourt Books is an independent supernatural press specializing in the rediscovery of rare, neglected, and out-of-print fiction. Despite the valiant efforts of a few small presses and the availability of new technology that can make books available to readers all over the world, far too many books remain out of print and inaccessible. We founded Valancourt Books in 2005 to store many of these works to new generation readers. Below you'll find information to what we publish and who we are. Gothic, horror, and supernatural. And this is the old style Gothic from, you won't find Horace Walpole here, but it does tell about how it started. But there's many books in the Gothic genre that they have found and republished, and some of them have not been published since their original publications. So check it out. Victorian Edwardian fiction, 20th century and modern. You can find all sorts of interesting authors right here. Gain interest, let the market take care of itself on that one. But neglected authors and works. This is for something that doesn't fit the other categories, but they think they need to be published all the same. So let's take a look at their catalog here. Let's take a look at horror and science fiction, what we find. Let's see. We find Robert Bloch, of course, one of the classic pulp writers, and what have you. The Vampire of Vorla, that draws your interest right there. And again, not all the covers are like this, because you see like The Abyss by J.R. Cunningham or The Legacy as well. That's classic stuff. But thanks to one of the channels I go through, that is, I don't remember if it's the Dungeon Dive or his other channel, he mentions a book called Paperbacks from Hell, and this is a book that you can find that shows all the 70s and 80s horror and all the covers and all that. Well, guess what? Click on this, and for a limited run, according to them, you can purchase special paperbacks of these books. And this is the type of stuff that draws your eye, in the old bookstores and all that. It definitely draws my eye. So for those who like those classic covers, check this place out. You can check by the author. It says, some of the books are here, just draws your attention, you want to read. The Women of Weird Tales magazine up here, Terrifying Transformations, Victorian werewolf fiction, and what have you. So yeah, it's a treasure trove of stuff to look into. You should not neglect this. You should put this. The Monster Club. Yes, there is this is the book that R. Chetwood Hayes, and this is from 1976, and of course they adapted this into a nice campy, low budget movie anthology horror stories with Vincent Price. So I looked at that. It's very good. Of course, there's House of the Wolf, Great White Space, and there's another book that will may draw my interest in the future, Necropolis. So yeah, this is, as I say, it's wonderful, and that's just a horror section. Let's go back and let's take a look at, let's see, Valancourt, Gothic and Romantic. This is from the 1790s to 1830s. This is definitely, if you want to go classic Gothic, as in that started the genre, not the 70s or 60s paperback stuff here. This is the real heavy stuff here. It's stuff that inspired Kari Wagner. I recently picked up a copy of Cavern of Death and Count Roderick's Castle, just because they draw my interest and whatnot. But there's all sorts of things to look into. Look at this, and nice covers too, classic art, what have you. And again, The Monk by by G. Lewis. That's one of the classics right here. But just wow, if you're tired of looking at bookshelves and not finding what you want, you will not be disappointed if you look through here. Of course, you can get these through Barnes and Noble and Amazon. They sell it. You may not find them on their shelves, but you can get them. You can order through there. Creatures of Our Age. I probably want to look into that one, what have you. But they even have a Carl E. Wagner novel, not one of his Kane stories, unfortunately, but one of his other horror stories in this, publications. So yeah, check this site out. You won't be disappointed. You want classic horror fiction mysteries and all that, from the Victorian times up till the pulp era. This is a place you want to go. Of course, there's other people praising this, and let me give you a quote from the back of the book here. Valancourt books are fast becoming my favorite publisher. They have made it their business, with considerable taste and integrity, to put back into print a considerable amount of work which has been in serious need of republication. If you are ever felt that there were gaps in your reading experience, or are simply frustrated you can't find good enough substantial fiction in the shops or even online, then this is the publisher for you. That is from Michael Moorcock. I can't see the light right here, but that's his quote right there praising this. So, yeah, I'm a huge fan of his work, and so I would definitely, if not through me, then if you're a fan of his, definitely check out Valancourt books. With all that said, The Great White Space, it is not a pretentious Lovecraftian horror. It's not a game changer. It's following into tropes in a nice way. Well done, presentation about this. It wears its sources on its sleeve. As basically at the Mountain of Madness crossed with Journey to the Center of the Earth. While they don't go to the center of the Earth, they actually keep going north in the mountains, but you get the idea, of all that. So, group of explorers, trying to, go into this cave and all the sort of mysteries, the jars, the city, the actual space itself. Will they make it through? I'll leave that up to the side. It's not that big of a book. It's 162 pages. It'll be a quick read, but it's a satisfying one. It's not trying to be the next, it's not going to top anything. Strange enough, in the theater of my mind, it kind of runs off like a 70s movie here, but, that's just mine. Yours may have a different visual. So, Great White Space by Basil Copper. Thank you all for watching. You have a nice day.